So one of the first and most essential things in the spiritual journey is to realize and have an intuitive sense of what you are. To allow yourself to rest and relax and feel and intuit this innate knowledge that we all have, this innate knowing that we all have, that what we are is somehow, what we are is divine and infinite and supreme and immensely gentle and immensely powerful at the same time. If we allow ourselves just to become still and allow all the sensations, the whole sensory experience to come into us. So to feel the body, to allow the senses to operate freely. See, when you're obsessed with thinking, if you're obsessed with thinking, you're distracted from the sensory world. If you're obsessed with your own thinking, you don't notice all the other stuff that's going on around you. You don't notice the feeling of the body, the sensation of the body, the sense of touch, the sense of smell. You don't notice all the sounds, all the colours. Now, I'm not saying you have to notice everything. You don't, because that's also artificial. If you're just like trying to notice every single shape and colour and sound, that's not natural either. But just to not be so obsessed with thought and thinking, and to come into the body, into the present moment, we could say. So do this now as I'm speaking to you. Come into the present moment. Unforced. Don't try and force yourself to become aware of everything. Just let go of the obsession with thinking. And if thoughts arise, they can arise. We're just not exclusively focusing on thinking anymore. What happens is the rest of our experience is allowed to come into focus. When you focus on one thing obsessively, and there's a word for it, it's called a fetish. A fetish is when you become obsessed with one aspect of whatever you're sensing. And most human beings have a fetish with thinking. We're obsessed with it. We tend to it. And it's a distortion. It's a lack of balance. Fetishes are a lack of balance. We pay more attention to one thing than is healthy. It's a lack of balance. So when you let go of the fetish, the thinking, then you naturally come into your body. And all the information that's coming in through your body, all the wisdom, you get in touch with that. So if there's a funny sensation in your knee, you become aware of that. If there's a funny sensation in your back, you become aware of that. If your shoulders are all tense like this, you become aware of it. And you can start to, oh, yeah, my posture's not quite as good as it could be. And you start to self-correct because you're allowing the wisdom of the body to function. You're allowing balance to come into your life. This is what I mean by saying come into the present moment. Lose the obsession with the exclusive obsession with thinking. Stop relying on thoughts exclusively to navigate our life. Another thing, what I mean by coming into the present moment, is to let go of desire and its opposite, fear, or attraction and aversion. Remember, attraction is a movement towards something, and aversion is a movement away from something. And the same movement. Remember, if you've got 2 points, point A and point B, if you're at point A and you're moving towards point B, that means you're attracted to point B, or you desire to go towards point B. Now, alternatively, we can phrase it as you are afraid or you are adverse to point A. You're moving away from point A. So this fear and desire are two aspects of the same force. It's a movement. And this movement of fear and desire is always based upon past and future. I'll just say that again. Desire and fear are one movement. Movement towards something, we call desire or attraction. A movement away from something, we call fear or aversion. It's the same movement. One, you can describe it in terms of going towards, or you can describe it in terms of moving away. And this movement of desire, fear, is in time. It's always from the past to the future. I'll explain to you what I mean by that, because it might not obviously make sense. But if I desire something, and by the way, being in the now is letting go of the bulk of this movement of past and future. I'll explain what I mean by past and future. How can this desire be past and future? A movement from the past to the future. Well, what I mean by that specifically is that whenever you desire something, say I desire a chocolate cake. Say I desire to eat chocolate cake. What does that mean? Well, it means several things. It means I have a memory. A memory is always of something in the past, correct? Memory is always something in the past. I have a memory of chocolate cake. And I have a memory of pleasure, happiness, when I ate the chocolate cake. That memory is etched onto my mind. There's like, if you imagine the mind is like a record, there's a blob, a positive blob on the record that says, happiness when I ate chocolate cake. It's a big blob on the record. And when that record plays, that's that track of remembering, it's replaying, remembering, oh, chocolate cake, that tasted good. I want some more. I'm going to go and get some chocolate cake. So what you've done, you remembered something that's happened in the past, in this case, something good, and you're trying to achieve it again in the future. I want chocolate cake. And then your desire for chocolate cake is always going to be a desire to get chocolate cake at some future time. Now, that future time could be in 5 minutes, it could be the next day, or it could be in 1 second time from now. But it's still a future, and it's based upon a past experience. You can't desire chocolate cake if you've no memory or recollection of having chocolate cake before. You can't desire something you don't know. And knowledge in the mind is always related to memory, isn't it? It is. Knowledge is related to memory. Memory is something of something that's happened. It's past. So desire is always based upon memory, isn't it? Yeah? No? Yes. Desire is always based upon memory. Memory is always of something that's happened in the past. And then you desire it to happen to you again in the future. If there's chocolate cake sitting in front of you now, you might say, oh, I want this chocolate cake now. But actually it's like a second from now or a millisecond from now that you're actually going to have it. And fear is the same. Say you don't want chocolate cake. Say that's the last thing you want. Then maybe you've had a memory of a negative experience eating chocolate cake. You ate chocolate cake and then, I don't know what's happened. You ate chocolate cake and then you got a really bad stomachache and it tasted horrible to you. I never want to have that to happen to me again. So now you think, oh, I don't want to have chocolate cake. This is aversion. There's another blob on your record, a memory record, and instead of it being a positive blob, it's a negative blob. It's a distortion. It makes you fear or be adverse. Fear is a very strong word. Aversion's a nice word because it covers the whole range of moving away from energies or the movement away from something. Whereas fear is usually a word when you strongly want to move away from something in a very strong way. You're very adverse to something. That's fear. Low level, it may be just anxiety or dislike of something. So this movement of desire, fear is in time. It's based on, what I mean by that is based on memory. That's what I mean by time. Thinking about the past, thinking about the future. Desire and fear are always based upon thinking about the past, which we call memory. I should explain that as well. Memory, what is memory? Memory is basically recalling or thinking about the past. It might be past information, like if you can recall the capital of France is Paris, that's knowledge in your mind. You're recollecting something you've learned in the past. It's based upon memory. So desire and fear are always based upon memory, which is the past, recollection of the past, and it projects into the future. Oh, I'm worried about my job interview tomorrow. Oh, I'm worried about meeting up with such and such a person tomorrow. This is all based upon your memories of these sorts of events having happened in the past. And now you're projecting into the future and go, oh, I don't want that to happen again. And therefore, I'm adverse to it. Or therefore, I desire it. This is the past future thinking. When we're thinking in terms of pleasure, pain, desire, attraction, aversion, fear. J. Krishnamurti calls this psychological time. J. Krishnamurti and J. Krishnamurti's teachers, he calls this psychological time. I think Eckhart Tolle also uses that phrase because Eckhart Tolle is very much influenced by J. Krishnamurti. When you read Eckhart, you can see the language of J. Krishnamurti creeping through. There's nothing wrong with that, but you can see it creeping through. It's a psychological time. Krishnamurti used to talk about two types of time. He used to talk about time by the clock, which is just not a problem at all. It's just time in Maya. Time in Maya, the illusion of time as it goes by. And psychological time, which is when our minds are obsessing about desire and fear, attraction and aversion. Pleasure, pain. This movement, this psychological movement, this energetic movement of desire and fear. This one movement. So come into the present means to let go of this movement. It doesn't mean you don't plan, but it means you're not encumbered by desire, fear. Come into that present moment. So allow yourself to come into the present moment. And when you do that, when you lose the obsession of this time-based thinking, which is actually the movement of the ego, desire and fear is the movement of the ego, is the dynamic aspect of the ego, as opposed to the structural aspect. It's the movement of the ego. Like a car has a movement. You can move backwards, forwards, turn left, turn right. Yeah, that's the movement of a car. But the car also has a structure, doesn't it? It's got maybe doors and windows and wheels. Maybe it's got 4 wheels and 4 doors and a certain number of windows. And that's the structure of the car. And then there's the movement of the car. So this desire and fear is the movement of the ego. When this ego stops moving, it's unlike a car. It ceases to exist. So in this way, the ego is like a wave. You know, a wave is a movement of water. And when the wave stops moving, it ceases to exist as a wave. The wave can only exist in motion. And when the wave stops moving, we no longer perceive a wave. In the same way, when the ego stops, this time-based thinking stops, and we come into the present moment. Now, when we come into why am I talking about this? I said, let me trace you back what I've been saying so far. I said, one of the most important things we have to do is intuit that we are the divine. That's what I'm coming to in this. And I said, if you let go of time-based thinking, you come into the present moment. And when you lose the obsession of this fetish or focus, unhealthy focus, unbalanced focus on thinking on one part of your experience, then the whole of your experience comes into focus and wisdom is much more likely to arise. And intuition is much more likely to arise. In this kind of more fluid, open state, where the ego is not so functional, or at least the dynamic aspect of the ego is not so functional, we can start to intuit and feel, yes, I am vast. I am, or I am more than this, or actually how it's often felt, because the structural aspects of the ego has not been touched so far. And I'll explain what I mean by this in a second. But because the ego structure hasn't been affected, you'll often interpret it as life could be so much better than this. Somehow, life shouldn't be like this. Life should be so much better. There's something more. Life doesn't have to be just like this. It could be, somehow I know, I have a feeling inside, life should be so much better than this. This is how this same intuition of being divine is often felt in your heart. It's felt that way because you take yourself to be body-mind, living in a real world, right? That's the structure of the ego. We come into the structural aspect of the ego now. So when the functional aspect of the ego, the dynamic aspect, starts to settle down, this time-based thinking starts to settle down, this intuition that I am divine comes in. But it's wordless. It's not in thought. So when it comes in, it's translated by the human mind through the structure of the ego. The structure of the ego is, the essential structure of the ego is this. It's the belief I'm a body-mind. The belief I'm the body-mind is the structure of the ego. So in the same way a car has a structure, once you've assembled a car with wheels and doors and the metal chassis body and all that kind of stuff, then it can move, right? Before you assemble a car, it can't move as a car. So only once this root idea, I'm a body-mind, is formed, this is the structure of the ego, then the ego can move. I want this, I want that. I'm afraid of this, I'm afraid of that. And remember, desire and fear are the same. You may feel, for any particular desire or fear, you may feel it more as desire, or you may feel it more as fear. One, actually, just as a slight digression, one very powerful technique, if you're trying to cope with desire, is to say, well, what am I afraid of? What's the fear that's there? Maybe a subtle fear, or maybe a not so subtle fear. And if you're having issue with fear, you can say to yourself, well, what's the desire there? What desire is there? And just try that. If you ever struggled with desire or fear, or addictions, or anxiety, just try that. It might not solve the whole issue, but it can loosen it up. So just play with that as well. What I was saying is that when our mind basically becomes calmer, this movement of ego and this obsession with the past and the future, desire, fear, memory, and projecting. So what happens with desire is that we remember something that's happened, a pleasant or unpleasant experience, and then we project, which means we imagine a future scenario. So if I had a good experience eating cake, I now use that memory and project or imagine, oh, I could eat cake in 10 minutes time. And it felt really good. So I can now imagine me eating cake and feeling really good in 10 minutes. I want that. And you start to chase this projected future. You see? Your mind has actually imagined eating chocolate cake in the future. And now you want it because that was a positive experience. Or if it was a negative experience, you say, I don't want that to happen. And you'll try and take steps to stop that happening. This is a past future based thinking, based on pleasure, pain. When that drops away, we start to intuit our divine nature. But because it's only the dynamic aspect or the functional aspect of the ego that's ceased, that allows this intuition to come in. If we're obsessed with thinking about the past and future, that reinforces our insecurity, our sense of lack. Almost all of this desire, fear, is based upon a sense of lack. Not knowing the self. Not knowing what we really are. When we know what we really are, there's no sense of lack. So this egoic desire and fear drop away. Addictive tendencies, addictive processes, anxiety, neuroticism starts to fall away, usually over some time. We start to intuit something special when this thinking goes. Because we still think, I'm the body-mind, I live in a world, this world is real. Remember, the structure of the ego is the belief I'm the body-mind. Yeah? The structure of the ego is the belief I'm the body-mind. And when you believe you're a body-mind, you also believe that you're living inside a world. And if you believe that I'm the body-mind, you're basically saying, I believe I'm the body-mind and I, the body-mind, am real. And therefore you project that reality onto the world as well. I believe I, the body-mind, am real, and I believe the world is real. And I can now look for happiness in the world, and I can struggle to avoid unhappiness in the world. I can strive for security in the world, because you don't know what you are. You've lost contact with what you are. So when this thinking mind dies down, this intuition comes in. Oh, I am the self. But it's distorted through the structural ignorance, the structure of the ego, which is I'm the body mind. And it's maybe felt as, life shouldn't be like this. I should be like my life should be more than this. Somehow I'm destined for greater things. This is why This is one of the reasons, at least, why superheroes may be very popular, by the way. Superhero, Superman. Let's just take Superman. This is a very simple superhero. Or very well-known superhero, I should say. Or being a hero of some kind, being an action hero. This is like, we all have a deep sense that there's something more. And because we still take ourselves to be body-mind, it's this deep sense of I'm divine is interpreted by the body-mind as this life should be so much better. And then you imagine yourself to be some kind of Superman or superhero, because you are. The superhero is what we are, but it's an expression of what we are through the distortion of ego, meaning through the distortion of the belief I'm a body-mind. You see? So some of us will be attracted to the superhero notion or the savior notion. Again, it's all a distortion through the idea I'm a body-mind. If you let go of that ignorance, so I've talked about the structure of the ego, the function of the ego. You can also call it the structure of ignorance, structural ignorance, and then functional ignorance. The structure of ignorance is this belief I'm separate, I'm limited, I'm the body-mind. And then once you have that structure in place, that structure again, desire and fear. Desires pleasure and security, fears pain and insecurity. The desire is basically for pleasure and security. Two types of security you're craving. One is psychological security, and one is physical security. Psychological security is also known as happiness, by the way. Psychological insecurity is pain or suffering, emotional pain, emotional suffering, or the sense that you may experience emotional pain. That's psychological insecurity. So, but we can also call it structural ignorance and the function of ignorance. So once we start to let go of the revolutionary thing about spiritual teachings is they undercut our identity. They undercut our identity. Or they reveal to us what our true identity is. Identity. Other worldly, let's say, worldly views, worldly philosophies, even worldly spiritualities, they will not challenge your basic identity as being body-mind. They will teach you how to be successful, either in a worldly way or in a so-called spiritual way, as a body-mind. Whether it's worldly success, financial success, material success, romantic success, personal success, or a kind of spiritual materialism where the identity of being the body-mind is not undermined. So this might be some kind of, if I meditate for a long time, the body-mind, can become self-realized. Or the body-mind, can develop cosmic superpowers. Or the body-mind can live for hundreds and hundreds of years. So this is why if you've got a more worldly-looking spirituality, which is a lower form of spirituality, and don't forget, these lower forms of spirituality all have a role to play. They can all be very, very helpful to the right person at the right time. So we're not denigrating it, remember. These are all a part of the teaching as well. They all have a role to play. Everything has a role to play. It's not always pleasant. It's not always what we want. But everything has a role to play. There are no mistakes. There are never any mistakes in this. This is all perfectly unfolding. Everything is perfect right now. But if you want to think, if you're not sure of this, if you come across a spiritual teaching and you're not sure, something seems a bit off about it, and you think, is this a worldly type spiritual teaching? you'll see they will extol and praise the body in some way. They'll say something like, "Our guru lived for hundreds and hundreds of years," and that will be a big point. Or they'll say, "Our guru, they look at their wonderful skin and their voice." They'll fetishize the body. So this is another fetish, where they focus on the body mind as a characteristic. Whereas when you get to higher types of spirituality, they're not so impressed. Even if the guru did live for 400 or 500 years or whatever it is, it's neither here nor there. It's not a big part of the teaching, because we're going beyond the body mind. We're not impressed by these sorts of worldly things. So again, if the spirituality is about some kind of special powers, psychic powers for the body mind, oh, this teacher is so good, they're so psychic and they have this charisma and presence about them. This is all about the body mind. You see? So we're fetishizing. We're projecting our own identification with the body mind onto another body mind. We take ourselves to be real. We take other so-called selves to be real. And then we focus on that, and that becomes a fetish. And that becomes a distorting factor. Now, there are some exceptions where we actually concentrate on something beautiful and divine in order to stop ourselves going, to stop that dynamic movement of the ego. And by the way, these two aspects of ignorance, the dynamic or functional aspect on one hand, and the structural aspect on the other hand, they directly correlate with the two types of practice or teaching: purification and insight or knowledge, wisdom. Can you see that? Can you see that? The purification aspect of the teaching deals with the dynamic aspect of the ego, the movement. If you think of the ego as a car, the car's moving all over the place, the ego is moving all over the place, suffering, causing havoc, getting confused, sometimes feeling happy, sometimes feeling confused, sometimes suffering, pleasure, pain, pleasure, pain. This is the suffering of the ego. The car moving around the place. The purification teachings just get the car to slow down and become still. But they don't destroy the car, they don't attack the structure. The wisdom teachings start to dismantle the structure of the car. They take the wheels off, they take the doors off, they break it all down until there's nothing left. So the purification teachings slow the mind down, so we come out of this time-based thinking, pleasure, pain, attraction, aversion, right? The knowledge-based teachings, the higher teachings, we say, don't forget, higher doesn't mean better. You need them both. You need them both. The knowledge teachings say, oh, look, you are not the body mind. You are the self. And that destroys the structure, the ego, which is this belief on the body mind. Do you see? This is why, if the car's moving all over the place, you can't dismantle it. In the same way, the ego is moving all over the place, trapped by desire and fear, entrapped in this movement, constant movement of attraction and aversion. And by the way, this movement of attraction and aversion is rajas and tamas as well. So when you're predominantly in the desire mode, in a positive way, that's rajas. When you're predominantly in a fear mode, that's tamas. You see, the movements of the ego. And when that movement, rajas tamas stops, what's that? That's sattva. That's peace. So the aim of the purification teachings is to become peaceful, to stop the movement of this ego car. You see. And then once the ego has become still, then we can start to dismantle it. But if the ego starts to move again, it reforms itself fully. This kind of ego car, if you dismantle it, once it starts moving, it reassembles itself fully, like some kind of like transformer, some kind of self-manufacturing robot that just materializes itself again and it's off, causing trouble again. This is why the knowledge teachings don't take root until the mind is fairly sattvic. Now, in reality, for most people, as the wisdom grows, they'll become calmer. And as they become calmer or more sattvic, the wisdom teachings will penetrate deeper. So they both have a mutual effect. We mentioned on Sunday, I think it was, about the third aspect of the teaching, morality, sila, which is about being a good person. And as you become more peaceful, it's more easy to do good things, be more loving, be more caring, and throw away the addictive tendencies that fall away. And as we become more wise, the same thing happens. Because all these, let's say, negative tendencies, the bad things we may do, are all based upon this wrong notion on the body mind. The ego is the source of all evil, basically. All suffering and all evil, all immoral behavior comes from ego as well. Doesn't mean that the person's going to be perfect, doesn't mean they're going to be infallible when the ego goes, but it just means the addictive tendencies, the self-centeredness, the neuroticism starts to fall away. So, I'm going to recap once more, and then I'm going to see if anyone wants to ask any questions. Very important to get a sense that you are divine. What do I mean by that? To get a sense that you are beautiful. Your nature is happiness and bliss. And this is your nature. Your nature is happiness. So just by being still and being what you are naturally happy. You are not the body mind. You are unlimited. You cannot be harmed or affected fundamentally, or in any way actually, by any of life. This means whatever happens in life, you're going to be just fine. Not as the body mind. The body mind's not going to be just fine. Maybe the body mind will be just fine, but eventually it won't. Eventually it's going to die. Eventually it's going to decay and die. But you, as spirit, as that which is divine, are going to be just fine. Because you are not the body mind. Very important to get an intuitive sense of this. You can't get this from a book. You can't get it from a teacher. But what books and teachers and YouTube videos, etc., what they can do, they can prompt you to discover this for yourself. You have to discover it for yourself in your own experience somehow. Find a way. My suggestion is that as long as you're focused on thought and you make a fetish out of thinking, you're going to miss the wisdom. The voiceless voice that says to you in a voiceless way, you are that. I am divine. You are divine. I use the words you are divine to express it. You might prefer a different word or sentence or phrase. Another phrase I used to like to use, sometimes I like to use it still, is children of God. You are a child of God. You are spirit. You are pure potentiality. You are the formless. You are the infinite. You are untouchable. Your nature is grace and happiness and bliss. You get a sense of this. I was saying that often we get a sense of this when our thinking subsides. We get an intuition that life doesn't have to be this way. But this is a distortion of this I am divine through the egoic notion on the body mind. Realize that actually this intuition you're having is true. Life doesn't have to be this way. Now, many people interpret that and try and get a better career, or they'll say, why is my relationship like this? I shouldn't have a relationship like this. My relationship should be much better. My life should be much better. If you're a spiritual seeker, let's say, that's wrong. If you're not a spiritual seeker, there may be sense to that. Or if you've got dysfunctionality in your work or love life or something, there might be sense to that too as well. But essentially, from a spiritual point of view, it's not that life could be better. It's that you could be better. You are not the body mind. You are much more than that. That's the real intuition. That's what that intuition really is. It's like, you are not of this world. You are not a human being. A human being is just an illusory appearance in consciousness. It's not what you actually are. You are not human at all. You are actually one spirit. There is only this one spirit. God, Jesus, Christ, Ramana, Buddha, the one, the nameless, the formless. This is what you are. And through these twin teachings of relaxing the mind, which we call purification, becoming sattvic, which we call purification, stopping the movement in time, desire, aversion, fear, attraction, time-based, memory-based chasing of pleasure, pain. Yeah? That kind of psychological time, as Krishnamurti called it. Not time by the clock. Not like, oh, after satsang is going to be at 10 o'clock. Let me make sure I tune in for after satsang. That's a practical thing. That's time by the clock. That's not a problem. Oh, I've got to meet Sarah and Gordon at this time on this day. That's not a problem. It's when you're desiring, you're projecting, I'm going to get pleasure, I'm going to get security out of this. I'm afraid of this, I'm worried about this. We come out of this way of thinking, even just for a while, we'll start to intuit this. And then if you challenge the assumption or the assertion or the belief, I'm the body mind, and that's the second aspect of the teaching. In Sanskrit, tat tvam asi. Tat means that, tvam means you or thou, and asi means is or art. Tat tvam asi, that thou art. That thou art. That you are. That is what you are. You are that. You are that. It's called that because that refers to the absolute, the formless. This refers to all the name and form, Maya. You are not this. You are not this. You are not this body mind. You're not this name and form. This world you see is not real. It's not a real. It's an imagined, it's a hallucination. It's a dream. It's an illusion. It's not real. You only think it's real when ignorance is there. You think the body mind's real. You think the world the body mind is in is real. But when you let go of all this stuff, you discover for yourself. You are that. Hasn't got a name, so they just call it that. You are divine. You are spirit. You are Brahman. You are not Jiva. Jiva means the idea that you're the body mind. That is false. You're not the ego. Ego basically means Jiva in this context. Once you have this basic intuition, this can give you spiritual strength to deal with the ups and downs of life. So this is the basis of true spirituality, this deep intuition that we all have. No one can teach you. You have to discover it yourself somehow. Once you discover it and have faith in it and realize that the extraordinary magnitude of this feeling, it may be just the initial feeling, life shouldn't be like this, life could be so much better, but actually it's, I am divine. This body mind has nothing to do with me. It's just a magical appearance. It's not even real. You'll discover it's not even real at all. Your nature is magical, beautiful, sparkling, effervescent, formless, magical. This is what we are. We are spiritual beings. not even plural. You're not spiritual beings. You're a spiritual being. Again, when the attachment to the body-mind is there, the spiritual teachings are distorted. The more attached you are to being a body-mind, the more the intuition, which is genuine, that we have, is interpreted and distorted by the mind. So you might say we are spiritual beings. Even that's a distortion, because there's still a belief that you are a separate being, or a human being, and so that distortion comes through to the spiritual teaching. It's why only through an egoless vessel, an utterly egoless vessel, does the true teaching come through in its purest form. Otherwise, it will be distorted depending on the degree of attachment to body-mind, which is why you have all these different grades of spirituality. They're all helpful at a certain point in time in the journey, perhaps. But we have Bhagavan, Ramana, who was a perfect vessel. So the teachings are incredibly pure. It's very rare. You'll see how all the other teachings are slightly distorted. They believe the body-mind to be real. Bhagavan knows the body-mind is not real. Even when he spontaneously, effortlessly, without any intention or desire, when he dispenses the lower teachings, there's still a knowledge in him that the body, mind, and world are not real. The whole of his teachings are flavored with realization, liberation, true nature. Even when he dispenses the lower teachings, they are given in a perfect way that's free of distortion. Very rare. This is why the distorted teachings, they'll be focusing on integrating into the body, integrating into the human experience. These are wonderful teachings, right? They're lovely at the level they're intended, but ultimately, if you're looking for liberation, if you're a true mumukshutva, someone who's got a burning desire for liberation, these teachings will not give you what you need. They will help you to be happier, be more sattvic, be more integrated, which is wonderful. But they will not liberate. This is why we can be so thankful to Bhagavan for his teaching.